What happens when an agency desires to acquire property rights but fails to follow the proper procedure to acquire them through eminent domain? Property owners are able to pursue what's called a de facto taking or an inverse condemnation case. However, that requires the property owner to, number one, establish liability, and number two, forego benefits found in the Uniform Condemnation Procedures Act, like reimbursement of a 1/3 attorney fee and reimbursement of expert expenses. Michigan contemplates that property owners can seek equitable relief or an injunction to compel an agency to follow the correct process. There's really 4 sources of law that support that position. Number one, the Michigan Constitution, Article 10, Section 2, requires that just compensation be paid first. Contrast that with the federal Constitution that does not have any temporal relationship between acquiring the property and paying the just compensation. As a result, federal law under the Fifth Amendment recognizes that a de facto taking is an adequate remedy. Based upon the fact that the Michigan Constitution requires just compensation to be paid first, a case called Bales, which we'll take a look at in the field, actually enforced an injunction against the Michigan Department of Transportation. After Bales was decided in 1976, the Uniform Condemnation Procedures Act was implemented, and there's 2 statutory provisions that support owners obtaining equitable rights. MCL 213.52 states that agencies desiring to acquire property rights shall follow the procedures in the eminent domain process through the Uniform Condemnation Procedures Act and shall not make it necessary for property owners to pursue a de facto taking claim. In addition, MCL 213.74 prevents agencies from engaging in any coercive conduct in order to compel property owners to agree upon a price. Let's go to the site of the construction of M14 where the Bales decision was decided. We're in Wayne County, next to the M14 freeway. In 1976, when the Michigan Department of Transportation was acquiring property rights to build this freeway, there was a case called Department of Transportation versus Bales. The underlying facts involved the Department of Transportation acquiring a number of residential homes that were part of a subdivision that had use restrictions, limited every property to being used for only residential purposes. The Department of Transportation settled with the homeowners whose houses that they were going to buy, but ignored the rest of the homeowners in the subdivision. As a result, those property owners filed a lawsuit asking for an injunction against the construction of the freeway until such time as the Department of Transportation acquired the rights to extinguish those use restrictions. The Michigan Court of Appeals upheld that injunction. The Department of Transportation made 2 primary arguments. Number one, that the property owners had a remedy. They could file a de facto taking claim. But the Court of Appeals said no. We're not focused on whether there's an alternate remedy. We're focused on whether the Department of Transportation followed the Constitution and followed the law. The Court of Appeals required following the law and using a formal eminent domain process. The Department of Transportation's second argument focused on the potential devastating economic impacts of stopping the construction project. They claimed that tens of millions of dollars in 1976 could be lost in terms of federal funding and that thousands of construction jobs could be disrupted. Again, the Michigan Court of Appeals did not focus on those issues. It focused on compelling the Department of Transportation to follow the Constitution and follow the legal processes. The 2 arguments that the Department of Transportation made were centered upon the standard concepts, the standard elements that courts evaluate when granting or denying equitable relief. Oftentimes, courts will focus upon whether there's an alternate money damages basis of recovery instead of granting an injunction, or will balance the relative harms to the property owners versus, in this case, the Department of Transportation. Those factors were overridden by the requirement that the Constitution be followed, that a government agency live up to the foundational document that allows it to exist. We're at the Lenawee County Airport. When they expanded the runway behind me, they had a two-phase acquisition process. First, they sought abrogation easements from the 5 houses at the foot of the runway. However, they offered only nominal just compensation, and after 2 jury trials and 3 trips to the Michigan Court of Appeals, they were forced to buy all 5 of those houses outright. As a result, they did not move forward with the acquisition process on the remaining houses at the foot of the runway. I was hired by those property owners, and rather than pursuing a de facto taking claim, I sought injunctive relief asserting that the airport authority was engaging in coercive conduct. Let's go take a look at the location where the houses used to be. The runway is over to my left. Behind my left shoulder were the homes in Phase 1 that were subject to the formal acquisitions. Over my right shoulder were the houses in Phase 2, where the acquisition was delayed and the property owners were left in limbo. If I had pursued a de facto taking claim, these property owners would not have had the benefits of the Uniform Condemnation Procedures Act, which includes things like reimbursement of a contingent 1/3 attorney fee and reimbursement of expert expenses. By pursuing an injunction under bails, we forced the airport to voluntarily acquire these properties as settlement to the lawsuits. As a result, the property owners were able to be paid the value of their homes, had their attorney fees reimbursed, and had their expert expenses reimbursed when it came time to establishing a purchase price for the homes. Obtaining an injunction preventing the violation of property owners' constitutional rights is a powerful tool. Before rushing to court and seeking a monetary remedy under a de facto taking or an inverse condemnation claim, it's necessary to evaluate whether obtaining an injunction requiring restoration of the property rights is the better course of action. Obtaining an injunction preventing the violation of property owners' constitutional rights is a powerful tool. Before rushing to court and seeking a monetary remedy under a de facto taking or an inverse condemnation claim, it's necessary to evaluate whether obtaining an injunction requiring restoration of the property rights is the better course of action.